Crushing the cultural Marxists, breaking the grip of corrupt oligarchs, and taking back our country through America first. Here's your host of liberty and reality, John Henson.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Liberty and Reality podcast. I just wanted to point out this flag behind me. I know it's not a normal Gadsden flag, and if you're not familiar with this is the Union Jack I got from when I was on the USS Kitty Hawk. Now, in the Navy, you have two flags that fly if you're in port. One is the International Ensign, is the regular flag. It flies off the back, off the fantail of the ship, and then off the front, or what we call the bow. The jack will fly. Normally the jack is just blue background with stars on it, except for the oldest ship in the Navy, which is what the Kitty Hawk was when I was on there. And they get to fly this Gadsden flag. So this is a piece of history I'm pretty proud of. I was able to get it as a farewell gift when I left the ship. So that's what's going on with the flag here. Today, for our show, we're going to talk about some history, particularly the 1964 presidential election. And, most people are probably not familiar with what happened in 1964. I certainly wasn't until I started digging into it. I knew there was a sea change in American politics at that time. I really didn't understand it until I started to look at it. And, the real problem of trying to get to the ground truth of it is you have to sift through a lot of propaganda. There were only a few news stations at that time, and they were very, very slanted one way politically, as most of them are today. Of course, they're owned by rich people, and so they have their own self-interests, and that's been like that with media through the history of the country back to the newspapers. But particularly in 1964, television was around, and a lot of people saw it, and a lot of people were deceived in that election. And we really need to understand the consequences of it if we're going to understand what's going to happen in the future to us if we don't take care of our upcoming elections. And as I go into this, I'm going to talk about Barry Goldwater and Lyndon B. Johnson. Of course, Lyndon Johnson won that election. And this podcast isn't to say that Barry Goldwater was going to win. He didn't have a great chance. A lot of that's because of President Kennedy being assassinated. Of course, President Kennedy was a very popular president, and Lyndon Johnson took over. He was his vice president, and so he naturally ran, got the party's nomination to run in the next election. And so he was kind of riding that wave of Kennedy's popularity still. But talk about Barry Goldwater because when he did lose, it did signal a sea change in American politics. I'll tell you why. Barry Goldwater was the last true classical liberal, libertarian type that we've had run as a presidential nominee, really, I think, since Calvin Coolidge, I think I'm safe to say. In 64, the Republican Party was still the home of classical liberalism and strict constitutional limits. Goldwater himself was a genuine civil rights champion. Before he was president, he did several things, including desegregating the Arizona National Guard in 1946, financing the desegregation of Phoenix schools. Of course, he was the senator from Arizona, and forcefully integrating, here's a little piece of history you may not know, integrated the U.S. Senate cafeteria. It had been segregated for a long time until Barry Goldwater came in and demanded that it be desegregated. Another thing about him, he was the first white senator to have blacks serving on his legislative staff. And later on, long after his presidential run, he became the first prominent, Republican, one of the first prominent politicians, particularly someone who was nominated to run for president, to advocate for gay rights. And prominent libertarians backed him. You know, really some titans of the libertarian movement and libertarian thought. Milton Friedman, Ayn Rand, Karl Hess, Murray Rothbard, they all advocated for Goldwater. So there was no Libertarian Party at this time. Keep that in mind. The Libertarian Party was either contained within the Republican Party, that's where they were for the most part, or they were independents. But going into election season, as always happens still, the media was in full propaganda mode. And the mainstream media deceived the public on who Lyndon Johnson and Barry Goldwater actually were. Now, Lyndon Johnson was not a moral champion of civil rights that some people try to portray him as. He spent his career as a dedicated obstructionist. He spent his first 2 decades in Washington actively protecting segregationists from the South. As a young senator, Johnson aligned himself with the architects of Jim Crow. He voted against anti-lynching bills. He helped kill civil rights measures. He defended the poll tax. And even in 1957, when he did manage to vote for Civil Rights Act, he gutted it. He gutted the provision stripping the Attorney General from suing the states. He inserted the jury trial amendment that guaranteed only white officials who were accused of voter repression, they'd be tried by all white Southern juries. And Richard Nixon, he called this a vote against the right to vote. LBJ only championed the 1964 Civil Rights Act because he'd run for president. It's because he saw the political math flipping. He saw blacks beginning to court and beginning to vote for the Democratic Party. And they really had voted Democrat since FDR, but not for racial issues. It was because of the Depression and because of the financial measures that the Democrats took to really distribute money. So what LBJ needed was to launder his segregationist past so he could be the president. And he did, with the help of the media. Now, Goldwater, he made a mistake. He was a political purist. He was a constitutional purist. And he walked into a trap. He supported the spirit of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, of course. He had a long career of supporting civil rights. But he voted against the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And he did it on constitutional grounds that the normal person is not going to understand. Now, it doesn't mean he was wrong, but in election season, sometimes you have to do things that are more popular than right. And in this case, he warned that the federal mandates on public accommodation and private employment violated property rights and risked creating a police state. And ironically, today, some of the things that the left, the cultural Marxists, want to put in place would be violations of that 1964 Civil Rights Act that Barry Goldwater talked about. And they can't do that. Some of these equity things that they are trying to do. Things like making special accommodations for certain races in the colleges. You can't do these things because of that 1964 Civil Rights Act. So at the end of the day, they paid for it. But, it doesn't matter because Goldwater was not elected. He stood his ground and it didn't work. And, because of that, triggered a devastating public relations backlash and allowed LBJ and weaponized media to label Barry Goldwater a radical segregationist and terrify the voters. Now, this mistake really changed everything in American politics. The Republicans had long been the party of civil rights, going all the way back to Lincoln. So this, combined with the Democrats' immediate embrace of Marxist class warfare, reshaped American politics entirely. It was all based on a lie. By painting the true civil rights advocate as a bigot, a lifelong segregationist as the savior, the Democratic Party pulled off a huge political heist. It shattered the electorate, consolidated the minority voting blocs on a lie, and gave Democrats the opening they needed to construct a massive welfare state, and allowed them to maintain power on the backs of poor minorities ever since. Goldwater's defeat shattered the partnership between Republicans and Libertarians because the GOP, after that election, went down the neoconservative path and they embraced the warfare state. Of course, this was the Cold War period. The Cold War had already been going on for almost 20 years at that point. And so the Republicans changed their policy to be more Cold Warrior type like. But in doing so, and becoming more aggressive with their foreign policy, they lost the Libertarians. And because of that, because the Republicans really embraced that warfare state in particular, we've lost over 100,000 American lives in foreign interventionist wars since then. In addition, we've saddled the nation with an inflationary national debt that is pushing past $40 trillion. Now, I 100% encourage you to go look up the debt clock online. Just Google it. Look at how much you, as an American, or you as a taxpayer, owe. It's an average, I get it, but still, you owe over $100,000 just for the honor of being born an American. This economy and this debt is unsustainable. But remember, debt helps the oligarch class. Anybody with assets, they love debt, they love inflation. This social welfare state trapped inner city minority communities on a socialist reservation. And it was because of LBJ's Great Society programs. They subsidized fatherlessness and dismantled the nuclear family. And if you really want to see the example, it goes back to the very beginning. The Pruitt-Igoe public housing complex in St. Louis. It didn't last very long. It's not there now. But while it was there, it was just a disaster. And it's really where this started. You couldn't get public housing if you had a father in the home. So what do you think happened? Women became single mothers. And the black nuclear family, because that's what most of the poor minorities were, the poor people in St. Louis were, the nuclear family went away because of those policies. And it continues to this day. Now, ultimately, LBJ's victory fundamentally re-engineered the state. He brought in socialist architects like Michael Harrington. He brought them into Democratic Party planning rooms. He transitioned the Democratic Party into a permanent, top-down, cultural Marxist welfare state. Now, when the centralized planning obviously, inevitably failed, the Democratic Party doubled down on identity politics. They've sorted Americans into hostile racial and cultural silos, and they've locked in a permanent dependent voting bloc. And they did all this on the backs of the American working class, because we're the ones that pay for it. No matter what they tell you, we're the ones that pay for it. No matter how progressive the tax structure is, it's us. And they pushed oligarch-friendly regulations that send American jobs overseas as a result of all of this. They don't care about you. They care about power. That's how they keep it. Now, for 60 years, the American working class had no shield against this. It wasn't until Donald Trump formed America First, particularly in his second term, that libertarians and mainstream Republicans joined forces again. This movement has represented our only real chance to destroy the ideological subversion Yuri Bezmenov warned us about. We talked about how it's ingrained in our institutions, particularly academics. America First is our only chance to roll back cultural Marxism. It's our only chance to take power back from the oligarchs. Unfortunately, right now, America First is on the verge of destroying itself from within. We're standing on those same types of fault lines as we had in 1964. If you look at the right-wing civil war that's tearing the coalition apart, it isn't just a minor policy agreement. It's all about emotion. It's all about people not getting their way. It's a tribal fracture fueled by, of course, unkept promises from Trump, but also ideological purity from the libertarians. And it's at the expense of realistic political strategy. And, it's okay. We all want to complain. I complain. I don't like a lot of things that Trump has done. But we have to be realists, y'all. We have to be realists. Because we know how bad it was before he came. We know how bad it's going to get if he's gone. The populist alliance that powered Trump into the White House is breaking over the administration's handling of the Epstein files and the shady circumstances around Epstein's death. And really, it's the lack of action on both of those things that's making people angry. It's also fracturing over the massive strategic blind spots surrounding Israel. In particular, this recent war against Iran. And thank God it appears to be over. But the base is still angry. I see a laundry list of those unkept promises, including the failure to execute the budget cuts under Doge and the flagrant violation of that core campaign promise of no new foreign wars. Now, I'm going to say something really quick about this settlement over the Iran war, because I hear a lot of people complaining about it, both from the anti-war and the pro-war side. And they're worried about Iran's going to get so much money. Well, who cares? I don't care what Iran does. Iran is not the United States of America. The United States is energy independent. We don't depend on the Persian Gulf. Now, I understand that global fuel prices are a single market, but that's okay. We don't have to take the lead in defending the Persian Gulf anymore. Europe and Asia get their oil from the Persian Gulf. We are energy dependent. It's not an emergency for us. The money that Iran is getting, part of it, this $12 to $24 billion that's talked about, is their money. It was seized. It was seized decades ago. Now it's being returned. And this separate $300 billion, now that's something with Iran and its neighbors. That has nothing to do with the United States. We're not giving up anything. We already wasted enough money bombing Iran. So thank God it's over. I really don't care. I don't care about this agreement. We're not paying anything. I'm just glad it's over. It's the best thing for us. And as I said in episode 2, remember, the best way to end this is for mutually beneficial economic agreement. We're not going to get anywhere with war. It's a civilizational crisis, civilizational clash. Iran's not going to give up. I guess if we had the will, we could escalate. We could always win. Just how far do you want to go? But if we're not willing to escalate, and I'm not, I don't think the American people are, then it's best to pull chocks and leave and be done with it. But this war is still a massive flashpoint in anger against Trump. And, Trump has made some really dirty decisions, aside from this, that really pissed off America First. Big one was what he did to Thomas Massey. He advocated for a primary challenge from a guy that was an unknown. And this came right after Joe Kent resigned, another libertarian Republican type. And Joe Kent, he seemed very friendly on his way out the door. He was going out of his way to really not intentionally bash Trump too much, but he was bashing what was going on. He wrote a detailed letter and went to the public, laying out his issues with the administration's their priorities. Now, during the Thomas Massie primary, there were several pro-Israel megadonors that funneled a record-breaking amount of cash to Massie's Trump-backed opponent. This is a man who refused to debate. He ran the exact same basement strategy that Trump had previously mocked Joe Biden for. Now, a lot of people are still furious about this. They're not going to let it go. They're still mad about the corrupt establishment hit job. I am too. But you know what? This gives Thomas Massie the chance to run for president in 2028 if he wants to. He can run for any office he wants to. He still has opportunities. And the thing about it is, the young people, they like Thomas Massie. So, as the baby boomers die, Thomas Massie is going to rise. So, be mad about it, but keep it in perspective. Keep it in perspective. You got to keep the America First Coalition together so we can vote for guys like Thomas Massie in the future. But we need to separate this raw emotion from the cold, hard political reality. And Thomas Massie is not without fault here. He ran as a Republican. And when you run under a political party banner, political party is typically led by the president. Especially when the person in office, the person who is president, is your same party. There's supposed to be some teamwork. Now, Thomas Massie overtly engaged in public scorched earth war with Trump. That was a disastrous political strategy for him. As unfair and corrupt and hypocritical as this primary challenge to Massie was, it was really Massie that sealed his own fate. He broke the rule and went to war with the president. I despise his tactics, and we can all do that. We cannot be blind to the way power works. And that's what we really need to focus on going forward. Now, the 2024 coalition has turned on itself. And it sparked a total meltdown in the independent media ecosystem. This is a big problem because that independent media ecosystem, particularly the podcasters like me, were the ones that really got Trump elected. Because we know how corrupt the corporate media is. And Trump's decision to go out there and go into independent media and do interviews was really smart. It was a great strategy. And Kamala Harris's decision to not go on podcasts that were unfriendly, podcasts like Joe Rogan, that was a huge mistake. Pulled her down. So whoever's running for president next, they're going to need that independent media complex. They're going to need the podcasters. So what's going on, this civil war that's going on in the independent media is really not productive. Trump turned on Tucker Carlson, a person that he was a friend with. I remember when Trump first got elected, actually before he got elected, he was going into UFC events with Tucker Carlson and Dan Bongino in tow, right? But Trump turned on Tucker because Tucker didn't agree with the Middle East escalation. He didn't agree with war, and Tucker's always been like that. It's not new. Now he was kind of sensitive. He never went hard against Trump until Trump turned on him publicly. Trump did that with a few of his other allies, just publicly degraded them. And then you got conservative gatekeepers like Dan Bongino, who used their platform to rail against his former America First allies, including, Tucker Carlson. Those guys partnered in 2024. It was a big, happy family. And then there's other highly influential podcasters like Dave Smith and Jimmy Dore, who openly shunned Trump and the MAGA establishment because they refused to carry water for an administration that is carrying out expanded forward intervention. Even Joe Rogan, who I talked about earlier, America's number one independent podcaster, he's distanced himself from Trump. He totally turned on him, but he's definitely distanced himself. He's made comments about what's going on with Israel, what's going on with these wars. So hopefully, now that this thing is over, we can get back to a little bit of kumbaya and being a happy family again. That's what I hope. There's a lot of bitterness, though. The movement needs to get back and remember its common interests and stop being fractured into these hostile tribes. Enough is enough. It's too important. Now, we, America First, all of us who are divided, are making this entirely about Donald Trump. We're forgetting Trump is one person. I understand he's the president. I understand he's the originator. You can call him a leader, maybe. I don't know now. Maybe we don't have a leader. We have a movement, and we need a leader. But we forget it was Trump that lit the match. The fire belongs to us. It belongs to the sovereign working class citizens of this country. And while Trump's tenor has changed, as he's taken that exit ramp in the Iran conflict and did it through a realistic settlement, the two factions have not settled their issues. Hawks need to stop screaming that the diplomatic peace is a defeat. And the isolationists need to stop throwing temper tantrums. We need to get back to domestic issues, get back to what unites us, because there's a lot that does. If we don't stop the friendly fire and protect this coalition, the fallout of 1964 is going to repeat itself. It's going to set back right-wing libertarianism, perhaps forever. And people have worked too hard to get the movement where it is now. The Tea Party movement petered out because of infighting and things like this. But America First has not. America First is strong. It's much stronger than the Tea Party movement was. It took a lot to get us here. Our opponents are simply too powerful to overcome without a strong, united effort. If America First breaks apart right now, we face total, permanent surrender of Western civilization, the oligarch elites. I don't think that's too extreme. We know what happened during COVID. We know what they're going to try to do. They've told us. And consider the consequences. If we lose the Senate, we're going to lose the Supreme Court at some point. It's going to happen. We have two constitutional Supreme Court justices, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, who are both in their 70s right now. And these men were very important during COVID, keeping us from tyranny. They've been very important on a lot of issues, keeping us from tyranny. And the Republicans must absolutely maintain those places on the Supreme Court. Because we know what the Democrats are going to do. They don't care about the Constitution. They only care about cultural Marxism. They only care about power. And if something happens to either of those justices, the right surrenders the Senate to this stupid civil war, that bulwark protecting us is going to break. That bulwark protecting our constitutional rights is going to be obliterated by these Marxist shills. Let there be no doubt. They're going to take advantage of it. It's going to be bad. Look at Australia and Europe. You can't even own a gun in Australia anymore. That's what they want. They want power. Look at the immigration situation in Europe. It's going to be here. It's going to be here. Make no mistake about the left playbook. They've already told you that next time they hold power, they're going to kill the filibuster. They're going to pack the Supreme Court. So then it won't even matter. It won't even matter if you lose the Senate. They're going to pack the Supreme Court. We can't let them do that. They're also planning to grant Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. statehood. That's going to give them more seats in Congress, more seats on the Senate, and more electoral college votes. They're tilting the advantage their way towards the cultural Marxists. And this will allow them to entrench cultural Marxism and their systems of control permanently in our federal government. We will have a permanent welfare state. We will have permanent inequality. We'll have an oligarch class and the poor. There will be no working class, just like every good communist country in the world. We will be subject to Chinese Communist Party style surveillance. We'll have a central bank digital currency. The government will track all of your spending. That's what's going to happen. We've already seen from 1964 how far the radical left is willing to go to achieve power. They'll do anything. And the media will help them. Because the media is owned by the oligarch class. Remember that. Independent media is gone. All those major media organizations are owned by the oligarch class. The only ones who aren't is us out here in podcast land. We're the only independents left. And we are powerful if we're united. Now, if the cultural Marxists win, they're just going to reinstitutionalize the entire apparatus of ideological subversion. So it won't just be a near-term thing. Even if we win another election, they're going to be back in the academic institutions, teaching the kids, teaching a new generation to be Marxists. And as Bezmenov told us, it takes about a generation to fix this. We need to stay in power. America First needs to stay in power, not the neocon Republicans. America First, the coalition. What the cultural Marxists will very likely do is fast track us straight from the crisis phase right to normalization. Just going to make it like it is. Make the social welfare state and the cultural Marxism permanent. They're going to open the floodgates. They're going to open the borders. That's the way it's going to be. They're going to ship all of the good jobs, the good paying jobs, overseas. Or they're going to bring in immigrants to do them. Because they don't want to pay you what you're worth. They want to pay somebody less. That's the way it is. That's why Democrats, their biggest complaint about deporting illegal immigrants is who's going to do these labor-intensive jobs. That's all they want. That's what they care about. So, what you're going to get is central bank digital currencies and social credit scores via ESG metrics. And you're going to be locked down in a monitored corporate fiefdom. You're going to experience tyranny. You really haven't experienced full tyranny yet. So a little bit during COVID, especially if you lived in a blue state, if you lived in a place like California, you experienced it. It's going to be worse. It's going to be much worse, especially with AI. So while right-wing talk show circuits eat their own, radical left operates with cold and unified precision. That's one thing you notice, right? The left acts as a group. They don't have a lot of dissension over on that side. They don't get out of their bubble very often. If they're told to do something, they do it. And there are reasons. It's not just the media. It's the funding that goes into their NGO groups. There's a lot of dark money that's coming in. It hasn't been tracked. The Trump administration is investigating a lot of that stuff. But you have people like Shanghai-based Marxist, American, by the way, tech mogul Neville Roy Singham, one of the oligarchs we're talking about. And he is currently being investigated for providing money to these shadow organizations. He's put more than $100 million in these organizations. So this guy, he's sent money to groups like the People's Forum, the people that are fueling those violent street protests you saw, those anti-ICE riots, the No Kings, those joke of a riots. But there's groups that are out there actually training protesters to be violent in the streets. And that funding is coming from people like Sid. And these protests, they hurt the working class. They block access to roads, bridges, airports, things we need every day. And they don't care. They don't care because they're dependent. They don't care if you get to work. They don't need to get to work. Their job is to protest. So Democrat Socialists of America, Communist Party USA, other captured groups, including the university systems, are waiting at the gates for us to finish each other in America first. At least those radicals, the university systems. They want us broken. We need to stop giving them what they want. We need to stop the bleeding. We need to stop bashing our allies, denigrating the independent voices who propelled America first to the landslide victory we achieved in 2024. That is practical liberty. It's not emotional or ideological purity. It's just where we need to go. America first as a movement is too important to sacrifice at the altar of emotional purism. It is the only viable populist shield that we have to protect us as working class citizens. The only way we can defend things like individual merit and stop our decline as a country. And if you don't think we're in decline, talk to your neighbors. Now, Trump's election has been good, but we're still falling. Everybody's having a tough time out there economically. But we're on our way back up. It's much better than it was. Especially with this Iran war being over, maybe the gas prices get back to normal. If we repeat that mistake of 1964 and let these emotional factors shadow our coalition, we aren't just losing an election. I said we're going to enable the permanent oligarch control Marxist takeover, the Marxist control system over our American political system. The consequences will be unbearable. We need to drop the friendly fire, stop the civil war. Remember, united we stand, divided we fall. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Liberty and Reality. Take care.